Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birnbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Tyler MacKillop. You know them. You love them. Unfortunately, Justin Boone is not here today. Our man is under the weather, but we soldier on without him. I guess I was the only one who got the memo about coming in costume today for this very special Halloween episode.
Got him.
Got to keep it professional, man.
Absolutely bamboozled by my co-host. You simply hate to see it. You know what? I'm not bitter. Like, I look cool. I look good. I have holiday spirit. For the record, I am a space cadet, or if you will, Aaron Rodgers. I had to do it to him one time. Okay, let's get down to business, lads. Talk some serious football stuff here while I'm dressed like Neil Armstrong. So it was in the not too distant past that we were capital W. This is just the most hilarious transition. It was in the not too distant past that we were capital W worried about the Philadelphia Eagles. 2-2 after 4 games. Nick Sirianni, their head coach, was going at it with their own fans after they narrowly squeaked by the Cleveland Browns in Week 6. And we wondered aloud on the show if he might be in trouble job-wise. Fast forward a few weeks, the Eagles are 5-2. They've won 3 in a row, and their last 2 victories have been particularly commanding. That last one came against the Cincinnati Bengals. Very different outlook right now for the Philadelphia Eagles. Wilkie, are the Birds back?
They might be. I don't want to get too carried away with the offense, first of all, because this was against a Bengals team that has completely fallen off a cliff defensively. We're talking bottom 5 EPA per play, so it's not the best barometer. Yeah. But opponent aside, this was still Jalen Hurts' best game in the last 2 years. Yeah. He did everything that you need him to do in this offense to play winning football. Just take care of the ball, the occasional big play, and just get it to your alpha receivers. Mm-hmm. The really exciting thing for me, though, is just how much this defense is coming along under Vic Fangio. It was a rocky start, but now you're seeing the rookies emerge, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and even last year's second first-round pick in Nolan Smith. I just think that this defense is coming together. The offense is starting to become what we were hoping to see from them, or at least what we had seen from them at the beginning of last year. And this just goes back to the beginning of the season where I was very interested in this team despite being totally out on Nick Sirianni as the head coach, just because the talent is so overwhelming. So I'm going to have to see it a couple more weeks to be sure, but I'm definitely not ruling them out as a Super Bowl contender.
Definitely a team that I think needs to and has been embracing the youth movement. You mentioned with Mitchell and DeJean, like Darius Slay, I think we're well past his best days of football. So I think that's a big factor in it. And I do think the pass rush is looking a fair bit better, which has kind of been the thing that's been keeping me from being all the way back on this team. And some of the early game play calling from Kellen Moore has been a little bit weird, like not getting Saquon the ball quite enough early on in games. He had a great game despite pretty quietly having a great game.
I will say Cincinnati. They still haven't scored in the first quarter. So
yeah,
that's the next step, right?
Yeah, just remarkable.
So
for me, I think I align with you. Look, they've had the 5th easiest schedule in the NFC according to Pro Football Reference. They only have 1 win against a good team. That was against Green Bay in Week 1. Sorry, Cincinnati.
Yeah, and
I think all the pieces are there, but I'm reluctant to anoint them a great team and a legitimate Super Bowl contender at this point. You know, you talk about how their defense has kind of coalesced a bit, but again, I think that the easy schedule has a lot to do with that. Yes, they are top 10 in the NFL in points allowed per game, but you know, you look at how many takeaways they have. They have 4 takeaways. Yeah. That's tied for the second fewest in the NFL. By expected points contributed from their defense, they've been worse than the Titans defense. They've been worse than the Dolphins defense. And I think it's important to remember, this was a bottom 3 defense in the NFL a season ago. Bottom 3. Yeah. And on paper, I don't know that this group is more talented than they were last year when they still had Hassan Reddick. So, you know, not to take away from what they've accomplished so far, I think they've done a really good job resting their season from what felt like the brink after starting 2-2 and only barely beating Cleveland to improve to 3-2. But I still need to see more before I'm prepared to anoint them, you know, a real powerhouse, I think, and in the top echelon of teams competing for the Super Bowl. Yeah. However, lots of positive things going down in Philly. And speaking of positive developments, what a shocking turn of events in Cleveland last Sunday. Jameis Winston, in his first start filling in for Deshaun Watson, and his first start since 2022, throws 3 touchdowns to lead the Browns to a stunning upset of the Baltimore Ravens, erasing a 1-point deficit in the dying moments of the fourth quarter. We've talked about this Browns team a lot and how they were utterly despondent under Deshaun Watson. With Jameis now running the show in Cleveland, what should the expectations be for the Browns moving forward?
I think that this is a team that's going to be a really tough out week in and week out. The schedule is a problem, just with the fact that the later part of the year gets really, really tough for them. But I do see a scenario, if you look at the rest of their schedule, it's up for you guys. Closing with, KC, Cincinnati, Miami, and Baltimore is really tough. And the Steelers have just proven to be a team that not many teams can seem to figure out offensively. But the Chargers, the Saints, the Broncos, those are games that they can win. A lot of these teams I think they can beat because it's still a really good roster that's getting healthier when you look at the offensive line in particular. Unfortunately for Deshaun Watson, this is probably the healthiest the offensive line had been all season last week on Sunday. They're still waiting to get Jedrick Wills back. But, I mean, you talk about DeJuan Jones, Bitonio. This team's getting healthier on the offensive line. Nick Chubb's only going to get more and more comfortable coming back from that major surgery. And I think we know the defense is good. So the question is, does management want to stay invested in this roster and this team and take a shot on making a wild card spot? I don't think it's likely. 2-6 is a really difficult hold to get out of, because that means most likely you're going to have to close the season, 8-1 if you really want to make the playoffs. But as good as Jameis has been, I do think not just with Jameis, just this entire roster, playing against it week in and week out is going to be very tough for all of their opponents. So I think they're kind of back. And we've talked about this team a ton. It feels like every week we talk about this team.
Yeah. They're back? Okay. Let's pump the brakes a bit, because this is Jameis Winston, fellas. Yes, superb performance on Sunday. Shocking stuff. This is Jameis Winston we're talking about. His last season as a starter, which was a half decade ago, he threw 30 interceptions. 30! In fact, if you go back to 2015, his first season in the NFL, among quarterbacks with at least 50 starts over that span since 2015, he has the highest interception rate, and he's bottom 5 in completion percentage. I can't overstate it enough. This is Jameis Winston. And now that guy is helming an offense whose best playmaker in the passing game is what? Cedric Tillman? How could we anoint this team being back? And we're not even talking about the Browns or Jameis Winston if Ravens safety Kyle Hamilton doesn't drop the interception, the game-sealing interception that Jameis Winston put in his breadbasket with the fourth quarter winding down on Sunday. The Ravens obviously win that game if Kyle Hamilton makes that pick. And we're talking
1-7.
We're talking 1-7. We're having a different conversation. So I don't know. Yes, he is an improvement.
Can you tell he's a Bucs fan?
Man, he's an improvement over Deshaun Watson, but that's the lowest of bars.
I will say,
true.
This is all about looking back on the Deshaun Watson time for me and just seeing how much of an upgrade it is just to go to a very low level starter.
Yeah, it's
You're
crazy.
just asking your quarterback to do the bare minimum. Just operate the offense the way it was intended.
Yeah.
And we saw this last year with Joe Flacco when he stepped in for Deshaun Watson. A veteran quarterback who was on the couch, that obviously it wasn't the case with Jameis Winston, but just a quarterback who doesn't have any sort of expectations whatsoever, but you just step up and you run the offense the way it's supposed to be run. Kevin Stefanski is a good offensive coordinator. It's just that Deshaun Watson was weighing this whole thing down.
Yeah.
You lift that weight off of them, and they're a decent team again. So, yeah, I don't have huge expectations with Jameis Winston. Like you said, he's going to make his mistakes, but at least with him in that offense, you have the ability to overcome those. With Deshaun, it was like you weren't getting anything on any given play.
Again, I don't want to go too far into this because this wasn't really the plan. This wasn't really the plan for me to discuss this, but
the plan was to wear costumes, all right? And we went on that
that's
script.
true. That's true. The plan. I don't think that their weapons are that bad. I think Elijah Moore is a pretty talented player that they can utilize out of the slot. David Njoku, I think, is easily a top 10 tight end talent in the league. Cedric Tillman, I think, is going to surprise people. He's a very competent college player who had a pretty major injury when he finished at Tennessee and came into the NFL.
Judy's fine.
Judy's
too.
fine.
Yeah.
I don't think their weapons are that bad. Again, I think the reason that they're tough out is because of their defense. Their defense is still very good. But now the offense, like you said, has basic competency. And they're leaning on their pass game a lot. They're throwing the ball at one of the highest rates in the league. So we'll see if Jameis can continue to keep things going. He'll probably continue to put up some numbers, but some of those numbers might be interceptions too.
Yeah.
Not all numbers are created.
They have a quarterback who can now push the ball downfield.
Yeah.
So that will help make up for some of the interceptions.
All right. Fair enough. We'll see. And to be clear, that was a miraculous victory, not to take anything away from them. Speaking of miracles, the Washington Commanders' Hail Mary to walk off the Chicago Bears on Sunday has to be the most miraculous thing that we've seen so far in 2024. It certainly gave more credence to the belief that these Commanders under Jaden Daniels are the team of destiny. But on the flip side, what a disaster for the Bears. Oh my God, that gutting loss snapped their winning streak at 3 games. Instead of improving to 5-2, they're 4-3. And as we approach the halfway point of this season, I think it's safe to say that this has been an uneven year for the Bears in the first year of the Caleb Williams era. Dan, how are you feeling about the Bears right now?
Not great. Not great at all. I mean, I think we all wanted to find some reason to be excited about them after their games against the Panthers and the Jags. But it's important to remember that was the Panthers and the Jags. You come crashing back down to earth against the Commanders, who haven't been that good on defense either. Dan Quinn is getting that headed in the right direction, so we will give them some credit there. But to me, this team just has such a big coaching problem. You know, you can put a lot of it on the personnel at offensive line, and if you want to direct your anger toward the front office, by all means do that. I'm on board with that. But you want to see the coaching staff do something to compensate for the deficiencies there, and they just can't do that. Caleb Williams was under pressure on over 50% of his snaps against the Commanders. That's just not going to get it done. We're probably not even talking about the Hail Mary if they don't hand it off to a backup offensive lineman on 3rd and goal and he fumbles. Like, you get what you deserve in that situation. And then on that last drive, they happily just give up whatever yards the Commanders wanted to get in position for the Hail Mary. And then after the game, Matt Eberflus is asked why he didn't call a timeout before the play. He said that all players were in position, so they didn't need to. As we know, all players were not in position. Tyreek Stevenson was literally in the corner talking trash to the fans as the ball was snapped. So I just think that this team has a big coaching issue. And you look at the rest of the season, I believe they finished with all 6 of their NFC North games, best division of football. And they've also got 2 games against the Niners and the Seahawks. I mean, I just don't see this team making the playoffs at this point. So I think a coaching change is probably very much on the table. That's kind of sounds like a disaster scenario for the Bears, but we were talking about this pre-show. I believe it was Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer said this week that Ben Johnson was eyeing the Bears job last year. Obviously, it didn't open up. Maybe it does this year. And, you know, obviously they wanted better this year, but if they get Ben Johnson out of the deal and he's the one developing Caleb, then I'll feel better about where this team's headed.
This is a franchise that just continues to make the definition of insanity, make the exact same mistake over and over with multiple quarterbacks now, where they have a head coach, they don't fire him while they're about to draft their next quarterback, and then they fire him after that first year. And it's really hard to be successful and find ways to move forward if you're making that same mistake. We've never seen this, and I'm not suggesting it'll happen. You know, Matt Eberflus, maybe just take the demotion. You can coach the defense, buddy, but you can't handle the whole thing.
Literally, that will never happen. But I love the spirit of the thought.
Hey, man, I mean, the defense was great.
It's been awesome. Yeah,
Ned Yost did it, and remember the Titans. You know, he wasn't too proud to move into a defensive coordinator job for Herman Boone.
What a callback.
And everyone remembers that team won the state championship. Shout out, remember the Titans. I got to rewatch that movie.
Yeah,
anyways,
egos get too big when you're making millions in the NFL.
Exactly. On that note, let's bring in our virtual homie, the Score's lead NFL reporter, Josh Tolentino. JT, good to see you as always, pal. So, the Indianapolis Colts, they're making a big change, and one that our boy T-Mac over here had been pounding the table for several weeks. Yeah. Anthony Richardson coming off another ugly performance in which he actually tapped out for a play because he said he was tired. He's not going to be the Colts starting quarterback anymore. It's Joe Flacco time in Indianapolis. Josh, what are you hearing about Indianapolis's decision to bench their supposed QB of the future, Anthony Richardson, in favor of veteran Joe Flacco?
Jonah, I spoke to a source who I describe as deeply connected to this Colts franchise, and they described to me how key decision makers inside that building thought it was inexplicable for the play that you described for Anthony Richardson to check himself out of the game like that. That was essentially the tipping point, in addition to his poor performance that we've seen a large enough sample size this season. Anthony Richardson, he's benched after just 10 starts and has not completed more than 50% of his passes in a single game. And, you know, while I've heard from a few people across the league, and then there goes Tyler right there, man. Just, again, 10 starts, has not completed more than 50% of his passes in a single game this season. And just discussing with people across the league who've argued the other side, you know, this is too early to make a switch, that it'll make a strain on his development. The Colts, at the same time, they're also trying to maximize the opportunity that they have with a 4-4 record. They're just 2 games behind the Texans in that division. Colts coach Shane Steichen, he said just as much to reporters this week that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win, and they believe they have enough leadership and talent to secure a playoff spot. They're getting healthier. Jonathan Taylor's back in the mix, so the run game will be improved compared to when Joe Flacco was under center earlier in the season. And obviously, Joe Flacco, the more seasoned passer, the veteran. Last season, he rallied that Browns team to the playoffs, and now the Colts are hoping for a similar effect as they make the turn to Joe.
Yeah, comeback player of the year. Finally, Tyler stops being ambiguous about how he feels about Anthony Richardson. He's finally making it clear after all these weeks. You got to love the commitment to the bit.
This is my costume. I did show up in costume.
Right. You went as the guy
I don't know if we
who's
can get the meme
convinced.
in post, but
yeah,
this
Anthony
is my
Richardson will
costume.
never be good. It's a recognizable character that we all know and love. He's canon.
I will
Josh,
never give up.
I know you were in Atlanta this past weekend for the Falcons. Victory over the Bucs. Their second win over the Bucs this season. Their fourth win in their last 5 games. You were inside that Falcons locker room, my man. What was the vibe in there after they beat Tampa Bay for the second time and improved to 4-0 against the NFC South this season?
Guys, in setting the scene for you, there's typically always a 15-minute cool down period after the game. That's typically where coaches give their post-game message to the players. Players get an early start on the showers before reporters come in. And, so after this cool down period ends, the doors open. And just to describe to you, basically everyone was still in their pads. They're mobbing Kirk Cousins around his locker. Just so much joy for Kirk Cousins this past week. Not only did they sweep the Bucs to improve to 4-0 and in the NFC South, this week also marked the 1-year anniversary of Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles. And now he has Atlanta firmly in the driver's seat at that division at the midway point of the season. Still a lot of football to be played. Kirk Cousins, though, ranks 4th in the NFL in passing yards per game, 7th in completion percentage over expected. And his passer rating for this most recent game, 145.9, the 6th highest of almost 160 career games for Kirk. You're seeing him become more mobile in his recovery, full rehab from that injury. Raheem Morris, the Falcons coach, described him as like Patrick Mahomes-esque in a scamper run towards the end of this most recent game. And, Kirk Cousins just has everyone in Atlanta believing right now. And you look at the division, the Saints, they started, with 2 consecutive victories. They've obviously been reeling since the Bucs injured without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin. And so Atlanta sees this as a clear opportunity to really take off. And after sweeping the Bucs, the reigning champions of 3 consecutive years, they really like their chances with Kirk Cousins directing the show.
Yeah, it's funny. After week 1, I think we were all kind of pulling our collars a little bit, being like, oh, Kirk doesn't look terribly mobile coming off of this very major injury. And then you eliminate his week 1 performance, and his QB rating for the season is about 102. He's been absolutely sensational since that game against the Steelers. Josh, before we let you go, we've got what feels like an obligatory breakdown, a wide receiver trade for us question. Deontay Johnson, one-time Pro Bowler. He's on his way from Carolina to Baltimore. Obviously, the Ravens' offense was pretty dynamic and one of the most prolific in the entire NFL before this trade. How does Deontay Johnson help Baltimore's chances in the AFC?
Jonah, I personally love this trade. GM Eric DeCosta of the Ravens, he adds another weapon to the NFL's #1 offense. The Ravens are the only team in the league averaging more than a whopping 450 yards per game. And now they add a speedster who has a track of exceeding really all throughout the route tree. And I feel like he can really help in the intermediate game. And I spoke to an accomplished veteran cornerback after the trade happened. And he described Deontay Johnson as someone who can run the entire route tree, and that he brings this dynamic. Some receivers, they only run 9s, they only run outs, or, they only exceed in certain types of routes. And the defensive back that I spoke to, he's a big fan of this move. And I'd argue that he's the most accomplished route runner in that room right now. Joins an offense, again, top in the league, offense that features Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and you cannot forget, obviously, the 1-2 punch there with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. This just makes a red-hot offense that more multiple, as ultimately we know the Ravens' goal is try to dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC. So this gives them all the more a better shot with Deontay Johnson joining the fold.
Yeah, you lose to the Browns, you got to make a move, and this was certainly an impactful one for Baltimore. JT, thanks so much, as always, for the insight, buddy. Happy Halloween. Love the costume of handsome football expert. Love it, man.
Guys, happy Halloween. Enjoy the football this weekend, and maybe we'll show up in a costume at some point later on.
I'll hold you to it, man. All right, boys. I want to stay on the topic of wide receiver trades for a second because, man, we've seen a lot of them. So Deontay goes to Baltimore. We got Devontae Adams to the Jets, Amari Cooper to the Bills, DeAndre to Kansas City, yada, yada. So full disclosure, Justin Boone was going to rank these trades for us here today in terms of impact for their new teams. But since he's not here, instead, we're going to have Tyler take us through Boone's ranking. So T, how would Boone rank these trades?
I'm trying to remember. I think that
there you go. It's up on the screen for you.
I think that his rankings in terms of where these guys are at are pretty good. I think Cooper's an obvious one. We talked about that one in detail. I did listen to Boone's show yesterday, actually talking about Deontay Johnson's impact. I think he's kind of underestimating the impact maybe he's going to have on the Ravens on the field. Maybe he's got too much, Boone, fantasy football.
Sure.
He's got a big fantasy outlook.
Brain. Yeah.
He was talking about Johnson's impact from a fantasy perspective, that it's great for Lamar. It's probably not great for some of their other pieces of the offense. I think he fits in so well when you look at Bateman being the guy taking the top off. Flowers is a great yards after the catch guy. Johnson's going to be able to, Mark Andrews isn't at the level that he once was. Johnson's going to be that go-to guy in third down situations and go-to guy to get this team moving the stick. So I think he's more impactful than maybe a DeAndre Hopkins. Potentially, Devontae Adams hasn't had a huge impact so far. Mm-hmm. I think he's maybe a little bit disrespectful with the Deontay spot, but ultimately I think all these guys are huge impact players. Like, this is a year where we haven't really seen these types of trades being made at the deadline for such high-level players. Obviously, some of these guys on expiring deals, but even so, these are some impactful players on some impactful teams, minus the Jets.
Yeah, guys who could really reshape the playoff hunt. But I know you got strong feelings about Devontae's placement there.
Yeah, I mean, Devontae is the best player on that list by far to me. But if we're talking team impact, the Jets are cooked, man.
Yeah.
It's over. So I'd put them at the bottom. And to me, I think the Ravens are – I won't say the Ravens over the Chiefs in the AFC, but they're right there. So, I think Deontay's got to be right near the top because I think he can help take that offense to another level.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's I think to your point, it just really completes what was already like a pretty robust and multifaceted passing game there in Baltimore. Sticking with trades, it's crazy. The next time we all get together, the trade deadline will have passed. It'll be in the rearview mirror. This is our last chance to will some deals into existence. Wilkie, what are some trades that we need to see before the November 5th trade deadline?
Well, I'll start in Pittsburgh because I think we're all pretty happy with what we've seen out of Russell Wilson so far. I think we probably didn't expect to be happy with what we've seen out of Russell Wilson to this point.
He was great on Monday night with the downfield game.
All that said, I don't think what they have there is enough to sustain it. I think they do need to make a move at receiver. Obviously, a lot of them have already come off the board. So to me, I'm looking at Mike Williams. I know some people might say, you want to get someone that complements George Pickens, maybe an intermediate route runner, maybe a speedster. But to me, Russell Wilson is not that guy that attacks the middle of the field. He ignores the middle of the field. He just throws it down the sideline, and he does that well, as we've seen. So I would just lean all the way into that, get another big body on the outside, just run the ball and throw bombs down the sideline. And sticking with the Jets because I think that they should probably pivot towards trading guys away now. It sounds weird just coming off the Devontae trade, but I think that they should be looking to trade Hassan Reddick. And to me, the Falcons make the most sense. JT was talking about it. They're at the top of the NFC South. To me, they look exactly like what I expected, hoping they would look like going into the season. Of course, week one didn't look great, but they really come around with Kirk Cousins in that offense.
Can we pause on that for a second on the Falcons side of things? Sure. They've looked fantastic, but somehow the addition of Judon, the pass rush has still been really poor.
Exactly, yeah.
Him and Jarrett, if that happened, then I really think the Falcons would be a legitimate Super Bowl contending team.
Absolutely, and that's the whole point is they've just got such a weakness on the defensive front.
Yeah.
I think they have to be aggressive. I think Reddick is the best player available at that position.
Potentially, yep.
And, again, maybe the Jets don't want to punt on him after overcoming all the drama to finally get him in the house, but again, we're looking at a Jets team that might be one win away from needing to go undefeated to make the playoffs.
Yep.
It's over, so they should probably understand that. They might have to run it by their general manager / quarterback, but we'll see. The last one, I'm going to go to the Lions, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to make two trades for the Lions. I think they need to go get Zadarius Smith from the Browns, and I think they need to go get Jadeveon Clowney from the Panthers.
Wow.
We talked about it when Aiden Hutchinson went down. He was doing a lot of heavy lifting for that pass rush. To the Lions' credit, they've still been a good defense without him. I believe they're second in EPA per play. I just want to see that pass rush addressed to really keep their ceiling in place going into the playoffs. I think that adding 2 guys like these can really help. They're gritty guys that do the good work against the run, but they can also get after the quarterback. And I think that they'd be cheap too. So I think the Lions would be silly to kind of just ignore the possibility of really addressing that need.
It would be a massive mistake if they did not make a deal for an edge rusher before the end of this.
Yeah, you were pounding that table, as soon as Hutchinson went down. It's like they need to replace this production because
do it twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Clowney's got to
win.
Clowney's got to be.
And I think we got to look at it like we mentioned Ben Johnson earlier. Like they're going to lose Ben Johnson this year, right? This is the year to win the Super Bowl. Just go all in. Like this is the year they can make it happen.
And I think the NFC too. Like you look at the top contenders in the NFC, it's the Lions and then maybe everyone else. Like this feels like it's their year. Like who right now, would even be in contention for that upper echelon spot alongside them in the NFC.
There's so many
I don't know that I buy the Vikings
bunch of them,
anymore.
but they might not even be at that level. Like it's Eagles, Packers. Technically, the Commanders are there, right?
Yeah.
And I think one thing people overlook for trade deadline moves in the NFL is the need to kind of bolster your depth for what comes after the trade deadline. Yeah. So say the Lions think that they like what they have in-house for their pass rush. They might be right, but if they get another injury after the deadline and they don't have any way to address it then they've got a problem. So I would be as aggressive as I could, and I'd add multiple guys here because they're going to be cheap and it's going to pay off.
Yeah. So obviously, a lot of talk about contenders, who might win the Super Bowl. Let's kind of flip the script a little bit. Of all the teams that are effectively out of the playoff race, I don't know that there are many in a worse spot right now than the Jacksonville Jaguars. At the very least, in year 4 of Trevor Lawrence's career, and coming off a second straight 9-8 season, the Jags were supposed to be competitive. At the very least, right? Competitive. Maybe not seriously contending for a Super Bowl, but, a solid team. Instead, they're 2-6. They are 25th in the NFL in point differential, and they're on pace for their 11th season with double-digit losses since 2011. Their 11th season, which is just unbelievable. T, where do the Jags go from here?
It's really interesting because the trade of Cam Robinson obviously kind of signals that we're going to be throwing in the towel. Not completely, but Robinson's a guy they really fought hard to keep, and they were just willing to let him go for a pick. He's obviously going to help Minnesota, but you're plugging Walker Little into that spot. And my concern with the Jags is I think they have 3 cornerstone pieces. I think Trevor could, depending on who you ask, some people think Trevor is that guy, and he is a guy who's thrown for over 4,000 yards in multiple years. His 2022 season was really, really good, but it has fallen off from there. Brian Thomas is ultimately, to me, a cornerstone piece. I think he's quite frankly, maybe the second best from this class. I'll give Neighbors 1, but I think Brian Thomas is 2. And then you have Josh Hines-Allen, who I think if this team was competitive and in more winning game scripts, I think he'd be right up there in contention to be winning Defensive Player of the Year, but he's not in a lot of scripts where he's able to just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. The question is everywhere else, because they brought in Ryan Nielsen from Atlanta to be their DC. He has a very specific scheme where he asks his corners to play a lot of man coverage and have that pass rush get after opponents. And this team does not have enough talent in their secondary to be able to do it. Darnell Savage has had a terrible year. Ronald Darby hasn't been good, another addition. They haven't had a great year from Andre Sisco either. Tyson Campbell. The list goes on with this team. And it's likely you're going to see a reset of head coach potentially, which means probably a reset across the board everywhere else in the staff. And is this a team that can feasibly rebuild in some sort of short order? They have some cornerstones, but everywhere else in the roster is massive question marks. Like Trayvon Walker has had an okay year. I think he has 6 sacks on the year. He's been decent, but everywhere else it's like, a veteran, Arik Armstead, who probably won't be around too long, who they just signed. They're in a really weird spot. And if you're a Jaguars fan, it's probably extremely frustrating to know that I don't know if the short-term futures looks very good at all for this team.
Does that mean this feels nuclear, but is there a world in which they move on from Trevor Lawrence and just start from scratch?
I think because the extension is so recent that it would just cripple their cap situation. That would be tough. We've seen teams not really care about that before, but I think that he's young enough, and I think he has shown enough that he'll be an attractive piece of the puzzle for a coach that's looking at that job.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's kind of taken a couple steps back, and to me, that's a reflection of the coaching staff more than it is on him.
Offensive line's also there's just no building blocks in the offensive line either. Like Walker Little's going to step in for Robinson. They added Mitch Morse in the offseason at center. There's just a lot of kind of veterans, or not maybe in their 30s, but in their mid to late 20s, like an Ezra Cleveland. It's just we don't have someone we can rely on. They're probably going to find a tackle in the draft. I would guess there's a couple good options, but yeah, just across the roster, there's no one else to really rely on but beyond those three.
A lot of holes. It's just it's a shoddy foundation. Having said that, it's time for a pretty depressing game of Would You Rather. So, considering both where they are right now and what their respective futures look like, would you rather be a fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New York Jets?
Oh, there's no third option. The Jags. I'm a Trevor Lawrence believer. I think he's still going to be a great player in the league. Just get the right offensive coordinator in there, or the right head coach. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers might retire. Either way, they don't have a quarterback of the future, so give me the Jags.
I would take the Jets. They just have a pretty good foundation between Garrett Wilson, between what they did to help their offensive line this offseason, Quinnen Williams, why am I forgetting now? The edge that just got hurt from Florida State. Regardless, Jermaine Johnson. McDonald's had a really breakout year. He was a guy they took in the second round at Iowa State. I think they have a better foundation than the Jags do.
Okay, so we're split here. The Jacksonville Jaguars or the Las Vegas Raiders?
See, I'm not being a homer here. I do think that the Raiders are kind of set up okay, where if they go get that quarterback and they go get the pieces they need to get, they can turn it around decently quickly. It's going to involve, maybe a head coaching change, but they have a ton of cap space. They're probably going to have the pick to go get the quarterback. I think I'd take the Raiders.
Yeah, you got Tom Telesco as your GM.
Well, that's
gladly
a factor,
take
yeah.
the Jaguars.
Well, they might not after this year.
Yeah, who knows?
Jags?
Yeah.
Okay. Jacksonville Jaguars or the Cleveland Browns? These aren't easy.
Yeah.
Like, this is a difficult game as much as it is depressing.
I think that I would take the Jags because they just don't have the Deshaun Watson. I know Deshaun Watson got hurt, so we're kind of forgetting about them now, but he's still got that contract for the next 2 years. So honestly, give me any team over the Browns.
Yeah. The Browns roster is also getting up there in age a little bit. Eventually, they're not going to be able to afford a lot of the pieces they have, especially on defense. So I'll take the Jags, yeah.
All right. Got to lock it in. Jacksonville Jaguars or the New York Giants?
I kind of think that the Giants might be just a quarterback away.
I think so. Defensive line is damn
the defensive
good.
line. I mean, you got to add a couple DBs.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether they're going to have a path to get that quarterback.
This year they will.
Give me the Giants. I like what they're doing on the defensive side at least.
I like the Giants quite a bit more than the Jags. Quite a bit more.
And last up, the Jacksonville Jaguars or the New England Patriots?
I love Drake May, but they just have nothing else. Nothing. Just give me Trev. I'll take the Jags.
Yeah, I'll probably take the Jags too.
Okay. All right. That was really...
You had fun. You had a lot of fun there. It seems
I really enjoyed it because you guys were really in the thresher there. None of those were easy. And I enjoyed subjecting.
You could have given me any answer for any of them, and I wouldn't have argued. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, it's a real pick your poison scenario. All right, fellas. You wouldn't know it from looking at the two of you, but today is Halloween. We'd be remiss if we didn't get into the spirit a little bit. So before we say goodbye with some trivia, it's time for our spooky segment, okay? Before we went live, I asked you guys to each come up with a team that scares you, and I left it up to you guys to interpret that however you want it. I didn't define what that means. Wilkie, who's a team that scares you and why?
Well, I interpret it as a team I don't want to play in. That's the Lions. They are good in every facet of the game right now. We've talked about the offense. They can score against anyone. We saw it last week. They go against the Vikings and play the
Titans.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago against the Vikings. Yeah. One of the best defenses in the league. No issues. The Goff is playing out of his mind. The running game is great. But it's not even just the offense. The defense, like we said earlier, second in EPA per play. I think they're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline to make sure that they don't really feel the loss of Aiden Hutchinson as much as they could otherwise. But also last week, the special teams was insane. They had, I think it was 262 return yards against the Titans.
Don't remind me. I bet on the Titans. And,
so we had
their defense did their job.
You were the one guy who bet on the Titans?
They were getting 12 points.
We had Jared Goff throwing for 85 yards, and you think, oh man, the Lions probably had a down week. No, they scored 52 points because they were starting every single possession in the other end of the field. So this team does it in every facet of the game right now. I would not want to run into them in the playoffs or the regular season. Heading into the season, I had the Chiefs over the Lions as my Super Bowl pick. At the midway point, I think I'd flip that.
So I don't. Well, again, this is up to interpretation. I kind of disagree. I know the Lions are I think the Lions are the best team in the NFC. But from a coaching perspective, I kind of know exactly what I'm getting when I play the Lions. They're going to run the ball on me really well. They got an excellent run defense. But if I want to beat them, I'm probably gonna have to drop back 50 times and throw the ball, and I might have a chance because pass rush isn't great. Secondary is definitely improving, but I think clearly if you're going up against the Lions, what it takes to beat them.
You're going to cover those linemen catching passes?
Yeah, true. No, the offense is unstoppable for sure. And I would agree in terms of scary. I think they're the best team in the NFC.
So who's the team that scares you and why?
My interpretation of this is a bit different. I thought of it. I brought up betting. I think this when I bet on them, am I scared? The Seattle Seahawks scare the crap out of me.
Love that.
Because I think that they're incredibly talented, well coached, but they also have had games this year where they just haven't showed up. Like they did not show up against Buffalo this past week. They didn't show up as well a few weeks ago. I'm forgetting who that was now, but they can also play at an extremely high level. Like I think Ken Walker is one of the most talented running backs in the league, like a top 5 talent in the league. This passing game has looked really, really good when they're all healthy. The defense has a lot of studs, but it seems to me like it doesn't matter if it's Mike McDonald, who's had a great history with Baltimore. They just sometimes are not showing up. They haven't been healthy on the offensive line. The Seahawks could be really, really good, but on that same given Sunday, they could also be playing at a level they played at this past week. So the Seahawks are a team that scares me, and I don't know what to expect from them.
I think right now their main issue is just depth. They're in the early stages of what they're trying to build there. They have good starters in place at a lot of key positions, but I think we saw it a couple weeks ago when they were without their main defensive lineman for a couple weeks. The defense just got shredded.
Yeah.
They got them back, and then they returned to the level of play they had before. This past week, DK Metcalf's out against the Bills. It changes everything for the offense. So when they're healthy, I love them. When they're missing a couple of their key players, I want nothing to do with them.
Yeah, I think they're going to get Abe Lucas back this week, who they've been missing big time. And I think there was George Fant was also practicing too. So if they get healthier, they got the Rams this week. They're at home. I think they'll beat the Rams, despite the Rams gaining some traction after beating the Vikings on Thursday.
I love that you both interpreted this question differently. That's exactly what I was hoping for. And while you both, I'm not going to stop belaboring this. You both let me down costume-wise, but you both delivered interpretation of that question-wise. So thank you both. And there's only one thing left to do, fellas. It's trivia time. Now, because Boone isn't here, we're going to deviate a little bit from our normal structure. Instead of one and done, 3 strikes and you're out. Okay?
Okay.
3 strikes and you're out. Kyren Williams has now scored a touchdown in an astonishing 10 straight games dating back to last season. Can you name the 12 players in NFL history with longer touchdown streaks?
Yes.
Chew on that for a sec. I'll give it to you one more time. Kyren Williams has now scored a touchdown in an astonishing 10 straight games dating back to last season. Can you name the 12 players in NFL history with longer touchdown streaks? 3 strikes and you're out. And T, you're going to go first.
I'll start with this guy because I better not forget him this time. I'll go with LT.
You got it. LaDainian Tomlinson. Correct. He scored in 18 consecutive games, which is the longest touchdown streak in NFL history.
Christian McCaffrey.
Correct. He scored in 14 straight games.
I'm going to be... I don't think I'm going to be wrong about this. Zeke on this list.
Really? Strike one.
God.
Strike one. Let me mark these down so I know where you guys are in the count.
Yeah.
T, you got 1 strike.
Sean Alexander. No.
Strike 1 on Wilkie.
I really thought Zeke would be on there. Is Derrick Henry on the list?
No Derrick Henry. 2 strikes on Tyler.
Okay, so I said this guy for a different category a couple weeks ago, and it lost me the trivia round, but I think it's going to keep me alive this time. Priest Holmes.
Correct.
All right.
Priest Holmes scored in 11 consecutive games, all in the 2002 season.
I'm on my last.
T,
strike.
you got 2 strikes on you, baby. You got a battle
here. I have to roll
here.
the clock back to some of these other guys I have. I don't want to say them out loud, but I kind of want to say them out loud so that when I am wrong, I can be like, oh, I was thinking of this guy, but I was wrong. Marshall Falk. No.
Strike 3.
Tough.
Tease out. Take a seat.
Oh my god.
So
You hate to see
do
it.
I have
Wilkie.
2 putts to win?
Yeah, I guess.
I
Yeah.
guess?
You
Okay.
only got 1 strike on you.
Oh yeah,
so
true.
Where did they score touchdowns enough back then? Jim Brown? Okay.
Okay, so Wilkie, you got 2 strikes on you. So if you don't get this next one correct, there is no champion. You both just struck out.
Barry Sanders.
I was thinking.
Oh,
no.
Strike 3.
Okay,
Strike 3.
touchdown
You're
streaks.
out.
Okay, Jamal Charles.
How many strikes do you
Oh
want?
no, we only got like 4
Jamal
of them.
Charles is not on the list. So here's what I'll say. There are a whole bunch of guys from
Todd Gurley.
our lifetime. That is correct.
Oh.
Todd Gurley's on the list. And there's also a bunch of guys from before our time. So, like, there's a healthy distribution. Todd Gurley is correct. He scored in 13 straight games between 2017 and 2018.
Herschel
Emmett
Walker.
Smith?
Correct.
Can't believe I didn't do Emmitt
Emmett
Smith.
Smith did it twice, man. He did it between 94 and 95, and then
Crazy.
again within the 95 season.
Oh, you know what? Terrell Davis?
Eh,
No.
Herschel Walker on there.
eh. This is.
There's
I'm
no more.
not,
There's
I'm
no
not
more.
just going to open the
There's no
floor
more.
for the guessing
There's no
game.
more recent.
No, there are.
Is like Kamara on there?
No.
There's some other recent guys like within the last 10 years.
Yep.
Le'Veon or David Johnson.
No.
Jamal Lewis?
Nope.
That would be.
You
who are
guys-
the recent
You
ones
guys
could
both
think of?
flamed out, so I'm just going to open up the floor to a guessing game. now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of more recent guys. That
How many
would
more
be-
do we need?
A lot.
A lot.
Like there's
You're
no
missing
like DeMarco
1,
Murray
2,
or
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're missing 7.
okay, just say
DeMarco
it.
Murray might be one.
I don't think is he.
Walter Payton.
Nope.
See, yeah, okay. You got to tell us now.
All right.
We're embarrassing ourselves.
Disappointing effort, but so it goes.
Actually, one more for you.
Okay.
Mark Ingram.
Nope.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
thinking
man,
about it.
I-
I don't
no.
think so.
Look, today wasn't your day. That's okay.
No.
All right, here we go. O.J. Simpson scored in 14 straight. He scored in every single game of the 1975 campaign. Jerry Rice scored in 13 straight between 86 and 87,
Oh my god, I didn't think we.
I'll
should
be honest, I
think
was just
about
thinking running backs,
receivers
yeah.
as
which is
running
generally
backs.
the right approach.
Yeah.
Like, most of these guys are running backs. George Rogers scored in 13 straight between 85 and 86. John Riggins scored in 13 straight between 82 and 83. And then you got Beast Mode, Marshawn Lynch,
Okay.
scored in
I can't
11
believe I
straight in
missed that one.
2011. Arian Foster scored in 11 straight between 2011 and 2012. And Jonathan Taylor scored in
Really?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
11 straight in 2021. I think he scored 18 total touchdowns that
Okay.
year, 11 of those coming in consecutive games. Unfortunately, no champion this week, but
The fact Arian Foster has done, I thought Zeke would be. You look at those guys, I was like, Zeke has had like 16, 17.
I can't believe Sean
touchdowns.
Alexander didn't do it in his huge
Surprising.
touchdown season.
surprising.
Anyway,
I-
you get the win this week for your costume.
I
Yeah.
think I do too.
Yeah.
It's one small step for man, but one giant, very gratifying thing for me because you both lost and I'm sitting here in a
That's right.
costume. All right. That'll do it for today's episode of No Timeouts. Once again, that's Tyler. That's Dan. My name is Jonah. Happy Halloween. We'll see you next time.